I'm deeply, deeply honored to be here speaking to you today. What I'd like to do, first of all, before I start, is I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been at IBM now for about 9 years. Prior to that, I was a serial entrepreneur for about 15. My sister and I grew up in a family of technologists. So both of my parents retired from IBM, and while we were growing up, we had computers in varying states of repair, sort of lying around the house. And the two of us were always encouraged to take them apart, put them back together, and of course, code on them. So of course we gravitated towards not just playing games, but designing them ourselves. And at the time, when I was ready to go to college, there were no such things as game design and development degree programs as there are now. So I ended up getting a degree in math and computer science, went on to do a career working for big tech for about 4 years, and then decided to start a company with my mom. So we did custom software application development for many years, and then my sister convinced me to start a company in the games industry called Women Gamers. Did that for many years until there was this big shift in the market, where suddenly people were talking about the casual gamer and the mass gamer. I decided to go back to business school to get my MBA. And while I was there, I threw myself into what is called case competitions. And this is when a company will go to a business school with a real life challenge. So I'm there, and there's a competition between UNC and Duke. And yeah, right? And I'm there, this is my 6th one. I really love these. These were so much fun. And IBM is sponsoring the contest. And the challenge was that they had business process management software, and they were looking for innovative ways of explaining it to non-techies. I had no clue what business process management was. They handed us a stack of papers about this thick, and they said, go read this. So I'm reading it, and maybe it was because I had been working with some companies who were developing strategy games at the time, but I thought, this is a strategy game. You're tweaking different business rules, you're seeing how it affects your broader ecosystem. You know, it could be like a SimCity style game. So I tell my teammates, I said, hey, we need to pitch a strategy game. And I ended up arguing with this one guy on my team till about 2 in the morning, because he says, games are for kids, IBM is too conservative of a company, they're never gonna buy off on this idea. So I argue. I said the average age of the gamers, 35 years old, 43% of PC gamers, 38% of console gamers are women. Over 67% of heads of households here in the US play very sophisticated games. He picks up his backpack and he leaves the room, so he abandons the team. And so the rest of us go and pitch this idea for this strategy game to help explain business process optimization to people. And unbeknownst to me, one of the judges was the vice president of strategy for IBM. And she pulled me aside on the spot and says, I'm going to fund this idea right now. Can you make this game for me in 3 months? So I was like, scratching my head, like, 3 months? It can take years to make a really good video game. And she says, well, I'm just looking for proof of concept to see, can you use a game to help explain something as complex as process change to people? And so that's my segue into the world of IBM and serious games. But it's been a very, very interesting ride since then. In fact, most recently, I've been invited to be a member of IBM's Academy of Technology. And what this means is it's a group that in effect keeps track of major macro trends happening around the world, and then giving advice and counsel with regards to how to maneuver. And so, you know, seeing this world of games, serious games, making data science actionable, and then most recently, the advent of artificial intelligence in Watson has just really opened my eyes with regards to what you can do. So I'm going to walk you through some of the major trends we've been seeing. Okay. All right, so firstly, I don't know how very familiar you are with the world of artificial intelligence and Watson in particular. But imagine with this kind of ability, you have the ability to, in essence, mine structured and unstructured data sets in order to find patterns, right? So Mark Johnson, in his earlier address, talked about personalized learning pathways. So this is one of the major technologies that we're seeing just making a huge impact across industries. Additionally, we're watching sort of the rise of the robot, right? Robotics, as a major trend, a major factor. The driverless vehicle, right? This is now a combination of robotics and artificial intelligence. Drones, so all of these technologies, automation, artificial intelligence, and robotics, and this is happening, in an environment of great fear, right? Why is there a tremendous amount of fear? Because of fear of displacement of jobs, right? So the question is, what do we do in order to prepare for something like this? So our last president talked about wage insurance, right? He was talking about implementing something like this as a means to prepare to copy what some of the Scandinavian countries have done as pilot programs. But even so, as we think about what this job displacement or major job change could mean for the United States, this is nothing compared to what it looks like potentially for other countries. And we're talking about this massive technology tsunami hitting us in the next handful of years. This isn't 20 years out. This isn't even 10 years out, right? This is within the next few years. So the question to us all is, what do we do to prepare for this technology tsunami? What are the things we should be doing now? What are the skill sets which we need to be teaching now in order to prepare? This is a research study that came from an organization called Institute of the Future. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but they were funded by the Obama administration and the MacArthur Foundation. And what they did, if you look at the sort of areas with the big spikes around them, these are the major macro trends that are impacting society around the world. Okay? And then what you see as the circles in between are what skill sets we need to be focused on in order to be prepared for these new collar jobs, right? So starting off here, there's been a tremendous amount of research and work thinking about what are the skill sets which we need to be teaching today. So the thought that we've been having is, and what I'd like to propose to you today is a three-step approach for how to rethink school, how to rethink how we approach and prepare for this technology tsunami that's coming. So the very first is to actually focus on the culture of the classroom, and in particular, introducing an entrepreneurial focus. So I don't know how many of you have read the book by Dan Pink called Drive. Dan Pink is an organizational and a behavioral psychologist, and he wrote a book where he studied all the different eras of humanity to figure out what really motivates people. So he looked at the agricultural era and the industrial era, and he says, you know, what motivated us back then was really the carrot and the stick. But he says nowadays, for the knowledge worker of today, what motivates us more than anything else is really a sense of self-direction. And he goes on to talk about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So as you think about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, really in effect is what he's describing when he talks about a sense of self-direction is this entrepreneurial culture. Not to say that, you know, every classroom is going to be about writing business plans and going out and making money. It's the culture, actually, that comes along with it. So, for example, isn't he cute? He's so cute. The rotating leadership model, right? The rotating leadership model, having cross-disciplinary classes. These are the kinds of aspects that come with having an entrepreneurial culture. Learning from Finland. Finland has adopted this wholesale from project-based learning to the entrepreneurial classroom. I mean, all of these things, these concepts that Finland has adopted, from throwing out standardized testing to now not having a ranking system between schools. I mean, just amazing to see. And year after year after year, they score in the top of the world, right? In terms of classroom standards. Additionally, what we've seen come out of Finland, as well as aspects of this entrepreneurial culture, is really opening up the classroom such that you look beyond the walls, right? Charlotte talked about going outside and sort of participating in the eclipse and seeing it. But with technology today, you can actually have massive intra-classroom projects, right? There's no need for the classroom to be confined by the walls of the classroom, in essence. Additionally, step 2 would be to consider completely different business models, right? This is a snapshot of a mobile makerspace. This is a startup that came out of NC State called BetaBox, where in essence they took a fleet of massive trucks, 16-wheelers, and they stripped them out and they piloted it with 3D printers that can print in both polymer and metal. They've got robotics, they've got sewing machines where you can sew sensors into clothing, and these trucks can roll right up into the parking lots of rural schools, right? So again, when you think about maker spaces and the entrepreneurial culture, being able to actually prototype and make, right, your own kinds of projects. To further this concept of new business models, industry collaboration is another big one, right? Being able to reach out to industry to help inform what are the kinds of curriculum, how might we influence curriculum in order to be prepared, again, to teach these new collar skills. This one I wanted to make sure I pointed out and talked to you in some detail. So, State Superintendent Mark Johnson talked about personalized learning pathways. I want to build on this a little bit more. So I don't know how many of you have heard of blockchain. What this is, think of it as a transactional ledger on the internet, right? It's being used for things like managing supply chains and preventing fraud. But in essence, imagine that you might have a whole host of different kinds of edtech modules, right? So this is online learning, right? That would be hosted on something like a blockchain, such that right now, when you consume online content, you might get a badge, right? So I just took a suite of online courses where I got a badge in cybersecurity, for example. If it's something on a blockchain, not only can you prevent fraud with regards to did this person actually complete this, but also a business value can be assigned to that online badge which you just consumed. And that business value could potentially change over time. So you could have, these industry consortium members, the business community going and assigning a value to what people are consuming online. Then imagine, right, that the way this online content is actually recommended to people is via artificial intelligence. Okay, so imagine that there could be an artificial intelligence that is able to gauge my strengths or gauge the strengths of my classroom, right? And then is able to peruse all this online content and make recommendations to you, right, based on what you should be learning. This is incredibly powerful, right? So Mark Johnson held up his cell phone and said, this is the future of learning. He could not be more true, more correct, because this center of where this content is going to be curated is actually going to be, on teacher portals, on cell phones, highly customized, highly personalized, based on what can be gleaned about a learner. Right, so in fact, IBM has a product called Watson Teacher Advisor, right, which uses this artificial intelligence agent, and it's a product that is being gifted out from our corporate service corps. So it's our version of IBM's a Peace Corps, in essence, that we're giving away to teachers to help them inform them specifically on math curriculum. But this is truly the future, and talk about the democratization of education, right? This is an incredibly disruptive approach towards highly expensive brick and mortar institutions. All right, so this is definitely coming. You might ask, though, what about the digital divide? You know, what about people who lack internet access? They're saying that by 2022, Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Google, many of these companies are now investing a tremendous amount of funding into addressing this particular kind of problem. But really, where I see the most opportunity for change is in digital engagement and enablement, right? So our kids are truly digital natives in many, many ways, but if you think about what's an incredibly powerful medium is this intersection of artificial intelligence and play. So I want to talk a little bit about what this is. There was a friend of mine who's a teacher in Texas at a disadvantaged school. And he reached out to me about 2 years ago, and he said, hey, I'm trying to teach computer science. The way that I'm teaching it is that I'm actually teaching through game design, but not just any game design, serious game design. And I'm using an entrepreneurial culture, in fact, using social impact as a mechanism. And I've got government agencies sponsoring themes for my class. So he had the Center for Disease Control sponsoring a theme where his class was supposed to come up with a video game that helped to explain pandemics to other kids, okay? So I'm gonna show you a short video, a documentary that we filmed of this classroom. Go ahead and play, thank you.
Denny, Kristen, Michael, Madison.
My name is David Conover, and I teach serious game design here at Conley High School. This is an at-risk school with close to 2,000 people. The students come from a disadvantaged background, but it's my end game to make sure that these students go on to higher education or to get a job in the industry.
His students have modded Minecraft. In their version of the game, you're flying a nanobot through a human body.
In doing so, you are killing off the elements that are a part of the infectious disease.
And what was really interesting, and the reason why he reached out to me, was because he wanted to integrate the entire game experience with IBM's Watson.
Watson comes in and interacts with the student's game. And this is truly mind-blowing because now we're getting feedback from Watson through the gameplay, and this is what hasn't been done yet. And this is what's truly significant because we're bringing cognitive computing into game design. We
actually have developed a game development ecosystem on our platform as a service, on IBM's Bluemix. And so what we did is we started to work directly with this particular class, giving them a recipe to follow with regards to not only how to stand up an instance of Minecraft on Bluemix, but also how to integrate it with different services available there, including our Watson services. So you're a level designer too?
Yeah. Within this construct is the key or the code that will allow us to connect the dots between STEM, game design, serious game design, and Watson.
What I'm drawing is actually a disease monster that is based off of tuberculosis. Whenever it catches you, it'll attack you, and you'll have periodic bleeding damage. And the only way you can fix it is finding vaccines really bad.
They do the research, they create their own companies, they become their own project managers.
This class is giving us more than we signed up for. It's teaching us how to program, it's teaching us how to code, it's teaching us how to make good teamwork skills.
Yeah, this isn't just a grade for us.
We're not learning for tests, we're actually learning for our own benefit. I want to become a writer or a coder.
I want to be in the group that makes the good product that really gets people to enjoy what we're trying to do.
This is a path that can lead me to exactly where I want to be. Art is a big part of me, and I express myself in art in a lot of different ways.
You can just create entire worlds for people to explore, or you can create little tiny stories for them to enjoy.
They are seeing their research come to life through their game. And once that happens, that's when full immersion takes place. That's when full engagement takes place. And that's the dream of every teacher, is to have that engaged classroom.
I do want to see one day that a game comes out that has one of my drawings or one of my ideas in it, and just see other people enjoying it. I think that would be just the greatest feeling in the world. And I think this is just the kickstart. This is just the beginning.
Right. Now this is my favorite part of the talk. So, as compelling as the technology story is with regards to medical Minecraft, the best part of the story is what happened behind the scenes for this. So I mentioned that this was a disadvantaged school. So as we were working on this project with this class, one of the lead students was rendered homeless. So the environment that these children were in whilst doing this project and throughout their school career was really, really difficult. David Conover, who was the teacher, told me on multiple occasions about gang violence within the school, Bloods and Crips in his classroom, drug busts constantly. So this was not a fancy schmancy school, right? When we were working with this classroom, we would Skype in regularly, and it really struck me while we were talking with the different teams of students, just how engaged they were, the kinds of ideas that they were coming up with. So I got so excited about it, I reached out to IBM's public relations and comms group, and I convinced them, I begged them, I said, please send a TV crew out with me to Texas, and let's go film this class. As we show up to the school, and we're walking to the class, no one from the administrative staff, the principal, no one came to greet us, and I felt that was strange. We go into the classroom, we're filming. Afterwards, we start to circulate the video internally within IBM, and there's just this huge surge of excitement. The teacher and I were invited to go and then present about a month later at this massive event out in Las Vegas, one of IBM's largest conferences in the world called Interconnect. There are about 20,000 people there. So we're up on main stage, we're talking, huge press and recognition. Within a month of that, David Conover, the teacher, was invited out to the White House, and he was recognized by Obama as being a champion of change in education. So, all good press. Then 2 weeks after that, I get a phone call from David, and he says, Phaedra, I think I'm going to lose my job. I said, what? What are you talking about? You were just main stage, President Obama, what are you talking about? And he says, my principal doesn't understand what we're trying to do. He says, think about it, right? Rotating leadership model, entrepreneurship. We've got kids failing fast, meaning they're trying out different kinds of serious game ideas. They're pivoting to new stuff. How do you measure something like this? There's signs out in the hallway that say no cell phones, yet we've got kids designing games for mobile phones. For the CDC, he says they don't know what to do with me, right? You don't know what to do with me. So I said, here's what you do, David. Call up your superintendent. Call him up, invite him out for breakfast. And he goes out to breakfast with the superintendent, and the superintendent says, look, this is on me. I've got to create a safe space for you to be able to operate. I've got to make it okay for you to incubate this new culture of the classroom, right? Specifically for your principal. I have to work with your principal, and I have to work to figure out how do we scale the seed of innovation. So it's not just your classroom, like how do we grow this out? So next thing I know, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, the principal, the vice principal, the teacher, like this entire group from Texas fly out to North Carolina. I bring them to last year's Worldview Summit. And then we did a design thinking session about culture change within the classroom and how do you measure success. I then brought them to Hunt Library. I showed them their very first, they hadn't seen makerspaces before. I showed them what makerspaces look like. I walked them through, and they flew out not once, but a couple of times. And then next thing I knew, I was invited to present to the Texas School Board. And I gave them the same pitch I gave you, right? The technology tsunami that's coming, robotics, artificial intelligence, automation, sort of how we need to be embracing the teaching of new collar skill sets within schools, the culture change that needs to happen. Because again, this isn't actually a story about technology as much as it is about culture change. And I cannot impress this to you enough. It's not about, packaging up some kind of technology and then people throwing it over some kind of a fence for teachers to deal with, right? It's about this kind of culture change. So because of that presentation to the school board, an academy was opened at that school, and then students from his classroom were able to intern at the Watson Lab out in Austin. And it's such a Cinderella story. Here's actually what his students are doing now. Do you remember the old toy Hungry Hungry Hippos? Yeah, so you're pressing the lever and it's making your hippo eat more marbles. So his classroom, again, entrepreneurial focus, what do the kids come up with? They, off of eBay, they buy a used brainwave monitoring device, right? I think it was like 25 bucks used. And they hooked up Arduinos to the hippos, such that the only way you can get your hippo to eat the marbles is by controlling your brainwave patterns and lowering your heart rate, right? So where are these kids piloting this new smart toy is for kids going through chemo at the Dell Children's Hospital in Austin. Isn't that cool? It's so cool. Highly entrepreneurial, right? What is it teaching them? To make something old new, right? You're taking an old toy, right? It's about play, but you're actually introducing kids to artificial intelligence, to Internet of Things. They're being highly entrepreneurial. It's just tremendous, tremendous what this kind of approach unlocks in kids, right? So what we're doing now, because of the medical Minecraft story and that success, is we're taking the seed of that and we've planted it, and we now are trying to scale and grow it, right? So everything I just told you with regards to cultural transformation, social impact, play, games, toys, artificial intelligence, right? In order to, again, seed this culture change. So if you think about these three major driving forces in the education paradigm shift, right? So you've got AI, robotics, and automation, right? Bringing on new collar jobs. You've got the decentralization of education, so you've got states who have more power to help inform curriculum, and then you've got access. So thinking about where we start there, and then mapping that to what the Institute for the Future has come up with regards to the macro trends and the kinds of skills which we need to be teaching today, we've come up with a draft structure on the kinds of things we'd like to teach. But again, one of the things I'd like to impress upon you is this isn't STEM, this is STEAM, right? STEAM. So really focused on bringing in the arts and humanities into this discussion, because it is absolutely key. Absolutely key, right? Being able to understand history and design and psychology and what motivates people, right? Art, right? These are key to making all of this happen. So our second step is actually making it useful, making it resonate with people. And here's where social impact comes in. So the way that we're actually curating all of this content is we are curating it via the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, okay? So what this means is the way that we'll introduce different technologies, right, is again via any one of these 17 goals. And in this way, the kids might be able to understand, first of all, here's what all the countries, I think minus North Korea, have come up with and decided are major global challenges that we all need to be addressing, and then, but also figuring out what does this mean to me on a localized level. The third rule that we're following is not to go into this alone. In fact, we're embracing what I'm calling unholy alliances, right? Meaning alliances that are truly surprising. whether it's with toy companies, game companies, NGOs, other major tech giants. Like we're seriously joining forces because we're all recognizing, again, this technology tsunami is coming and we can't afford to do this alone, okay? So here's an example of how this would work out. Again, you're capturing the attention of the students and the teachers with both global as well as local challenges associated with these SDGs. We are introducing them to different kinds of recipes and use cases, right, that they might be able to follow. And again, we're doing this not just in traditional learning spaces, but also non-traditional learning spaces as well. And then what we want to do is showcase those, not just the students, but also the teachers, just like what we did with David and his classroom. So, let me show you. Okay, here's what our first course is actually going to look like. We're actually testing this right now with an organization called Girls Who Code. Right, so we've got 50,000 girls currently going through this first course that we've created. So I mentioned to you artificial intelligence at the beginning, Watson in particular, that has the ability to mine structured and unstructured data sets. So what it's also able to do is able to gauge what emotion people are feeling based on either spoken word or written text, right? It's able to gauge what people's personalities are, right? So imagine, if you're familiar with what a chatbot is, right? Imagine if I can program a chatbot, not just to have a conversation with someone, but to actually have a conversation with someone whilst recognizing what emotion they're displaying, whilst being able to guess what personality they have. Now, I can create a chatbot that's highly customized and curated to the person that I'm targeting, right? We're calling that an empathy bot, okay? So we're introducing kids to empathy bots. We're introducing them, firstly, to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of Global Health and Wellness, right? And then introducing them to design thinking, right? And we want to do this, we believe we can do this as early as elementary school, as early as even kindergarten, some aspects of design thinking, right? And then whilst thinking about, through the design thinking module, the kids will actually be able to gauge, okay, if I'm going to make an empathy bot that's able to counsel someone who's being bullied, or is able to counsel someone who's suffering from PTSD, I need to actually think through what the experience needs to be in order to motivate that person to adopt completely new behaviors, right? So again, I mentioned STEAM, not STEM, right? So bringing in those arts, right? An understanding, what is it that's going to motivate this particular end user? What's the right kind of journey that needs to be curated for them? So then we give them an introduction to chatbots and how to actually create their first basic chatbot, and then starting to bring in the artificial intelligence, right? Of how you can use something like this to glean people's emotions, personalities, and then tailor something highly specific. We've actually created a basic stress bot, right? So it's able to gauge, is someone feeling stressed out or not, and then giving people, different kinds of advice, and then the students build upon that. But it's a very clever way to introduce kids, again, to artificial intelligence. The two use cases which we're showing to them so that they can connect the dots between what we're teaching them and what's actually being implemented out on the market. This is a company that is actually using empathy bots as a means to help gauge the mental wellness of police officers, right? So he and his brother, his name is Dan, he and his brother for many years provided psychological and psychiatric support to the NYPD and Connecticut police departments. And he came up with a way of being able to assess whether a police officer was going slowly towards a trough of depression or not. And they were able to measure through their assessments such that they would be able to catch someone before they dipped too low, such that they would either leave the force or commit suicide or become corrupt, right? So what they wanted to do with an empathy bot experience was to be able to get away from asking a police officer the same questions every single day. They wanted to be able to glean information from things like, Internet of Things, how well they're sleeping at night, these kinds of things as a means to be able to inform how the empathy bot works. With this example, this is an entrepreneur who actually used to work with the former chief of police for the city of New Orleans during Katrina. He was a disaster preparedness subject matter expert. And after leaving the force, he has now started a company where he's creating disaster preparedness games for kids, right? And it covers everything from floods and tornadoes to active shooters on campus, right? So the way that he's approaching the use of something like an empathy bot is that imagine if you've got a child that's got a smartphone, the empathy bot can be able to guess what the age of the child is, what emotion they're displaying, what kind of room they're in, where are the exits, and then run them through different kinds of disaster preparedness scenarios. Again, you want to talk about customization, right? This is it, right? Being able to glean and mine all this kind of data in order to curate, again, a highly customized, highly personalized experience with impact. This isn't just, teaching something to the average child in a way that's hard and that doesn't change. This is, let me find out about you, and now I'm going to tailor this experience based on what I know. So he's actually now partnering with Marvel Comics, and he's going to be coming out with the first version of his game. So again, we wanted to show, here's what these entrepreneurs are doing using this empathy bot idea. The second course we want to tackle actually uses robotics and introduces kids to image recognition software or artificial intelligence. So in this case, we want to introduce plastics pollution within the oceans as a sustainable development goal, the reduction of plastics pollution, teaching kids how to, first of all, things like data bias with regards to artificial intelligence, but then how to train them to curate the artificial intelligence to recognize images. For example, whether this is a piece of seaweed that's floating in the water or a piece of plastic that needs to be picked up. So imagine they could create things like smarter garbage cans. But the premise is that as we're teaching them these basic recipes, the whole point is that the kids come up with their own, right? The kids came up with their own rendition. So for example, in the empathy bot idea, right, I remember talking to one of the students in David's class. She was telling me that her father had been deployed multiple times to Afghanistan and to Iraq, and that the reason why he was suffering from deep PTSD, and the only thing that really helped him manage his stress was playing video games. So she was telling me she wanted to devote her career to games for health, games for mental health in particular. So what she was gravitating towards was this concept of an empathy bot that's being tailored specifically to help with her dad's PTSD. So again, connecting these technologies, these recipes for kids such that they're able to think about local, even if not family, issues that they might be able to address and tackle. A little bit more on Watson image recognition. So one of the projects which we'll be introducing to the kids is actually, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but if you fly a drone too close to the nest of a predatory bird, oftentimes the predatory bird will try to take the drone down. Right? You guys have heard this? So with image recognition, you've got the ability to recognize what kind of predatory bird is chasing the drone, and then you can play a sound that's actually terrifying to that particular bird, right, and chase it away. So again, this kind of ability, right, of being able to spark the imagination within kids' minds with regards to what they can do. Here's another idea that we came up with for a course. This one was specifically around gender violence, introducing kids to mobile app development, and then having them reskin a mobile game such that they would create a training app that would help others recognize signs of human trafficking, right? So again, this is a project around Artivism. So we really think, again, speaking about STEAM, Artivism is art plus activism, ways in which we might spark the imagination of kids. This is a project we did, I want to say it was a year and a half ago, with a fashion brand called Marchena. And they make beautiful ball gowns, and we partnered with them for, in preparation for the Met Gala, sort of this big fashion show in New York City. And we had folks from R&D sew in little tiny LED lights into the gown, right? And there were sensors. And anytime anybody tweeted about the Met Gala expressing an emotion, the dress would light up different colors. So if I said, okay, I'm really annoyed because I'm stuck in traffic and I'm not gonna make it to the Met Gala in time, the dress might glow blue. If I said, oh man, I am so psyched, I just saw the most beautiful gown at the Met Gala, the dress might glow gold or yellow or pink, right? So it would change based on the aggregated sentiment of the crowd, right? Now, take that concept and expand on it, right? So again, back to Artivism. I've had a lot of conversations with city governments about citizen engagement in games, right? And this is one of the ideas that has been coming up time and time again is, imagine if you can aggregate sentiment about how people feel about public policy and show it through art, right? So, you know, I'm driving up towards Raleigh, and on the side of the Civic Center, you know that big shimmering oak tree. What if I'm driving up and it's glowing red, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are people so upset about? Okay, let me check. Oh man, it's, you know, hashtag immigration policy, or, you know, or whatnot. So imagine, again, through art, through things like fashion, being able to connect people to ideas, to programs, to how other people are feeling about things. This is incredibly powerful, and as we've been working with the girls from Girls Who Code, certainly this is something that they were very much gravitating towards. Oops. Here's another module on cybersecurity that we're very interested in. Introducing kids to systems thinking, again, as early as elementary school, giving them a taste with regards to, you know, what is threat analysis. We designed a board game in order to teach threat analysis. We've already tested this with middle school kids. This has been very, very successful. Here's what the board game looked like. You know, is your online identity secure? One thought that we've had, you know, as we were thinking about, okay, as these kids come up with cool projects, what do we want to do next, right? Do we offer them internships, kind of like what we did in Texas, but then wouldn't they have to be sort of in cities where there are IBM hubs? Like, we really want to figure out, how do we make this global, you know, global scale and reach? So one of the ideas we've had that I wanted to share with you was, within IBM, we've got this really cool platform for curating new ideas for things called Cognitive Build. Think of this as kind of like an online competition for IBMers, where we post ideas for things and then it gets ranked and voted on and vetted. And our thoughts were, as students come up with cool projects, they can share them online through an external Cognitive Build, right? It gets sort of the People's Choice Award. It can be voted on and vetted. And then in lieu of us offering an internship to these kids where goodness knows what they'd end up doing, right? Instead, what if we said we would like that student actually work with IBM's R&D in order to get their project out of prototype and into production, right? Wouldn't that be cool? Right? Again, you're expanding, you're scaling this concept of entrepreneurship, of social entrepreneurship, social impact, such that the kids, kind of like what we saw with the Hungry Hungry Hippos example, the kids actually get to do their dream. They actually get to do their idea and work with R&D in order to make it happen, right? So we're really focused on making this vision a reality. Right now, what we're heads down doing is figuring out how is it in essence we would be able to enable teachers on something like this. So again, I mentioned, we're embracing a lot of different kinds of unholy alliances. So organizations that do focus on things like teacher enablement in order to get the word out, in order to scale this. As we finish up with Girls Who Code, we'll be taking all of this content, putting it online. All of this will be available online. But the way that we're building these courses and these modules is that we're preparing them and we're building them in such a way where it can be pulled from other sites. Meaning, so I remember that image I told you of blockchain and the artificial intelligence agents. We fully imagine that there will be teacher portals that will be able to access and pull content from different parts of the internet based on what the teacher is most interested in teaching. So that's how we're starting to prepare and curate that online curriculum. So it's early days still. We're still learning a lot, again, from the Girls Who Code pilot and from talking to teachers about the kinds of things they want to see and do. But thank you again for your time today. And if you've got any questions, I'll be wandering around a little bit afterwards. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.